Don't.
That was my wife threatening to... Hold on a second. Please do not openly share your political beliefs on Facebook. Four schools of thought when it comes to booze. Okay? Now you have the spring break at Daytona Beach mentality, where you can just suck it back. And most Christians, most Christians, that's your real nominal. You don't believe that. You know, even like normal, you don't have to be a Christian to know alcoholism is bad. Okay, so, but you have some people that think that, okay? And then we call it license or whatever to sin or whatever. Okay, so we're not even going to talk about that. But a real big one in the church is prohibition. And prohibition is the idea that alcohol itself is evil, that alcohol itself is bad. Check out what Luther said. Now Luther, if you told him alcohol was bad, or if the idea for Luther that you would serve grape juice in the Holy Eucharist, he would roll over in his grave. Luther loved beer, married a brewer. If you read Luther, you know, we call him such a hero because we honor the prophets after they died. But if you actually read what Luther wrote, my goodness, you'd still call him a heretic. It's all beer and fart jokes all the time. Cuss like a sailor, Luther did. Encouraged his preachers to cuss like sailors if they needed to share the gospel. Wild man, love him. Okay? But this is what he says about alcohol. Check this out. Do you suppose that abuses are eliminated by destroying the object which is abused? Men go wrong with wine and women. Shall we then prohibit and abolish women?
Good.
It's a joke. You had a better sense of humor than you. I used to think Luther was so bitter and evil, and I never saw, he's being sarcastic. It's hilarious. He'd draw these little pictures of the Pope on his pamphlets, like the Pope coming out of Satan's rectum and stuff. It was all a joke. It was all just a big laugh. Imagine sitting around with this theological buddy, just having a beer, laughing about, look at the picture I put on this one right here. The Pope's got like pig bone in his hand or whatever. It's just so he's a crazy guy. You know why you have services on Sunday at like 11:30 a.m.? Because before that, the Catholic Mass was always at 6:30 a.m. And Luther would sit up talking theology with his buddies, drinking beer on Saturday nights. And he's like, man, that 6:30 a.m. Mass started getting a little painful, so they pushed it back to 8:30. Man, imagine, you can argue over the carpet, imagine arguing over changing the service time. It's been that way for 1,500 years. And then he pushed it back to 10:30, and then he figured 11:30 is as late as we can go and still call it a morning Mass. That wasn't necromancy. So, the whole idea that prohibition, that alcohol itself is evil. Now, forget all the Bible verses. I mean, you know, other cultures, they're like, how could they possibly think that? They read their Bible. Psalm 104, 14 and 15, he makes grass grow for the cattle, plants for men to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth, wine that gladdens the heart of man. We know Jesus' first miracle, John chapter 2, was to turn 180 gallons of water into wine. That is 600 liters. Imagine bringing 600 to 700 liters, bottles of wine to the party. And that's after they drank all the coolers of the cheap stuff. That's crazy. Now, if you went to Pentecostal Bible School and you think Jesus was turning the water into unfermented grape juice, I'm not going to argue the Bible with you. I'm just going to mention this little thing called science. Did you know that up until the 1800s, late 1800s, there was no such thing as unfermented grape juice? Until a dry as a ship's biscuit, sourpuss pap of a Methodist preacher named Mr. Welch invented a way to stop the God-given process of sanctification. To stop the God-given process of fermentation so that the evil of alcohol would not touch the lips of his congregants during communion. Just like the church, isn't it? Jesus turns the water to wine. We've been trying to change it back ever since. Now, my biggest problem with prohibition is not that it draws hard lines where hard lines don't exist. And just to be on the safe side, we shouldn't touch it. Okay, well, just to be on the safe side, you should stay in your house all day long too, lock the doors, buy an armed guard. I mean, come on, be on the safe side. Since when was freedom and liberty safe?
Yeah.
My biggest problem with prohibition is not that it's drawing these hard lines or hard lines and making rules where they don't exist. And like during Prohibition, obviously that caused Al Capone, the rum runners, which made organized crime, which developed into the Colombian drug trade, drug mules crossing the border by the millions, murders, mass murders, gangland murders by the millions, abortions by the millions. Thank you, religion, for drawing hard lines where hard lines don't exist. The law causes sin to increase, Romans 5. How much more man-made humanistic laws to protect ourselves from the good gifts God gives us? So that's not my biggest problem with prohibition. My biggest problem with prohibition is that it paints God out to be a dry as a ship's biscuit, sourpuss pap of a preacher, when in reality he is a drinker. He is the life of the party. As a matter of fact, he is the wine itself. Amen. Think of this for a second. What does he use to symbolize your faith? I mean, if you still think this is unfermented grape juice, then why does he say, do not be drunk on grape juice, but be filled with the Holy Ghost? Okay? Look, here he is, he's sitting around the table with the boys, starts off his whole earthly ministry. How do most preachers start out their earthly ministry? They graduate some Bible school, shake the dean's hand, sign off on a page that will never have another drink in their life. How does Jesus start his earthly ministry? A kegger. I think I can hang out with this guy, Jesus. Look at all these schools that they don't allow. Students have to sign certificates so they can have a drink or they get excommunicated. Dude, you would cut out of church today almost every major saint, reformer in church history. John Calvin got paid 250 gallons of wine a year. Getting paid in booze. So Jesus starts off with a kegger, and how does he end his earthly ministry? Sitting around the table with the boys, having another drink. And now, think of this. What does he use to symbolize your faith? He could have used a vanilla bean latte. He could have used a green kale smoothie. What does he use? He uses an intoxicant, something that is illegal in most world religions. He says, okay, my Father's kingdom, our union, this whole gospel is symbolized by a cup of hooch. Isn't that scandalous? And look at how we pictured that little cup up in the stained glass windows, just rubbed right over the scandal of it all. And just baptized the scandal. Just a cup of grape juice. So this prohibition. And I grew up with a lot of that. I went to this church, Pentecostal Holiness Church, as a kid. Man, that'll turn you into an alcoholic quick. Suicide attempts and alcohol overdoses. Dudes drinking a whole bottle of Tylenol. Man, I saw dudes foaming at the mouth going on drug overdoses and stuff. These were the deacons. But amen, the preachers fought them sermon against booze. Isn't this nuts? My goodness. And then there is another thing here. We have another perspective on drinking, which will be number 3. We had Daytona Beach, spring break, we had prohibition, and then the other one, this is the big one, it's probably the biggest one, and this might step on a few toes here tonight, is something called abstention. I don't believe that alcohol is evil, but I'm going to abstain so that I don't cause my brother to stumble. There's a lot of Christians who would use to stumble into a good stiff drink. Okay, let me just make this really clear. Let me help you out with what that one's called. That one is called Doctrine of Demons. Okay? Hang on a second, John. Why are you bringing this up? You're just going to call somebody to stumble. Look, if you're in AA, don't go on a bender tonight and say, Crowder told me to do it. If you've had trouble with the bottle, lay off the bottle for a while. But let me tell you, that AA theology ain't going to fix you up because you are not an addict.
Amen.
Okay? You are a son of God.
Amen.
You're not bound by that thing.
Hallelujah.
You know who you are.
Yeah.
What does he say? 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 5. The Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. You know how many heresy hunter websites have used that verse on me? It's like, why don't you flip your flipping Bible open and see what these doctrines of demons actually are? Let's read a verse ahead. What do? They forbid people to marry. Remember this book called I Kiss Dating Goodbye? That was good for our generation, wasn't it? Helped us out a lot. What else do they do? They order them to abstain from certain foods. Now, I know you put this supernaturalistic, demonized sort of view of alcohol. Some people, I know it's kind of crazy to think of it this way, some people would think of alcohol as a food. I know that's nuts. Let's keep moving here. Which God created to be received. That was a little too high for you, Revelation. Which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it's received with thanksgiving, because it's consecrated by the word of God and prayer. And then you got 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, it's not talking about drinking water. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. When it says the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they called him a glutton and a winebibber, he's not saying he drank water. Why would they write that down? Yes, the Son of God, he drank water. And he breathed. You're not going to believe this. He breathed air. No, he tipped back. Jesus liked to take a nip every now and then. But I know that we need to hold a higher moral standard
than Jesus,
than the world and Jesus.
Yeah.
See, Jesus did it in private. That's how the Pharisees found out about it.
No.